Welcome into Hittin Hard with Jon Chuckery here on Locked On Sports Atlanta. Today on the show, Trae, turmoil within the Hawks, and Stetson's a different cat. I'm back. Hittin Hard with Jon Chuckery, Locked On Sports Atlanta.
This is Hittin Hard with Jon Chuckery, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta. And it starts now.
Hittin Hard is brought to you by Bet Online. Head over to youtube.com, put Locked On Sports Atlanta into your search browser. When you get there, hit that subscribe button. We're pushing toward 6,000 folks that have subscribed to our channel. We are available to download for free on all of your favorite podcast platforms, including Spotify and Odyssey. Check us out on Roku and Amazon Fire. Yes, we are on those platforms as well. And follow me on my personal Twitter page at JMCH316. So an article came out yesterday from Lauren Williams, who's the beat writer for the Atlanta Hawks for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. And I guess he's the sports editor. He's the former beat writer, Chris Vivlamore of the Atlanta Hawks for the AJC. He did it a couple of years ago. But they had an article out that talked about reports were that they were floating out the idea of trading Trae Young. Now, they said in the article they're committed to Trae. They're not going to trade him, but they did exploratory talks, and I didn't read all the teams and stuff like that, or if they even listed the teams and such like that, but there was exploratory talks about the idea of trading Trae Young. Now, we're going to talk about the turmoil within the Hawks organization because there's revisionist history. There's a lot of things going on. And those are the words that have been used: turmoil, dysfunction, things like that. So we know that Nate McMillan and Trae Young haven't had the best relationship in the world. And obviously, in normal times, when it's a choice between your star player and your coach is going to be the one that goes away, but you always listen to offers. Look, being committed to Trae, not wanting to move on from him, but taking conversations about the possibility of trading Trae Young is business, and it's not bad business, and look, if you could get the right haul, look, the Hawks traded on draft night Luka Doncic, right, to get Trae Young. So he's already been traded once. The Hawks didn't draft Trae Young, but you have those exploratory talks when it comes to, your star players. And let's be frank and let's be honest, okay? Outside of the 1 year when they made the Eastern Conference Finals, there hasn't been a whole lot of winning. There hasn't been a whole lot. Now, I'm not blaming that on Trae. I'm locked in to Trae Young being the superstar that we build around. And you've paid him super max money, not just max money, but the super max deal, right? He's gotten, he got, I think, third team All NBA a couple of years ago, which kicked him into his super max deal. So you're paying him a crap ton of money. And there's only so many teams that can, number one, take on a contract like that. And then number two is when you trade for a supermax player, you can only have a limited amount. I think it's two, maybe it's three, but I think it's two supermax players that you can have on a roster when you trade for them. You can draft and sign all the supermax guys that you want if you're willing to get in the luxury tax. But when you trade for a player, there's only a limited amount that you can have. But it's business. I mean, we haven't done enough winning over the last few years. And look at where the Hawks are right now. Now they're back up to 500. But at the midway point, they were a 38-win team and the 9th seed. Well, let's be honest. yes, Trae Young is a valuable piece and he puts butts in seats and things like that. But from a record standpoint, if you don't have the rest of your guys there and your guys are always hurt and always injured, and we talked about several weeks ago about how many games were expected to be played for the Atlanta Hawks based upon their injury situation, 38 wins is nothing. Like that's, and especially in a rough Eastern Conference. I mean, it's not like we're competing with Milwaukee and things like that. 38 wins is nothing for this organization. They were supposed to be a top 3, 4, 5 seed, maybe be a 45 to 50 win team when all was said and done with the expectations that were there. And we'll talk some about this. There's sort of some revisionist history with the Atlanta Hawks. But you do these kinds of things to put out feelers to see what you can get. And by the way, a general manager's job, whether it's Landry Fields or now Kyle Korver is now the assistant GM, it's a GM's job to upgrade the franchise. That's the number one goal. Am I better today than I was yesterday? Am I going to be better tomorrow than I was today? That's every general manager's job, is to upgrade. Now, look, there are very, very few players that could be in the mix because when you factor in the money aspect of it, okay, you have to be somewhere, I think it's in the 80 to 85 percentile of money. So you can't, even if you wanted to trade Trae Young, even if you just said, we just got to get rid of Trae Young, you can't just trade him for a bag of balls, right? I mean, you can't just trade him for some Gavone that's a 12th man off the bench or whatever like that. You have to make the money match up. So there are very few of those guys. And look, that's where you would get into, you would have to package probably multiple players together to make all of the money work out. But it's business. I don't expect that Trae Young is going to get traded unless the franchise just falls off a cliff. And I believe that Nate McMillan will not be here next year, and they're going to hit the reset button with all of this. And what I mean by that, they're not going to completely turn over the roster, but you're going to move on from Nate McMillan. And I don't, unless there is another Eastern Conference Finals run or NBA Finals run, unless we make a really deep playoff run. And right now, the Hawks are, in that 9 seed, and they're just kind of floating around. Yes, they've won 3 in a row. Great. That's got them back up to 500. Now we're going to go into a stretch of the schedule that's amped up a little bit tougher. We didn't take advantage of the schedule. Okay, you have those kinds of talks. You're a fledgling franchise. And it's the number one reason why, and again, we'll get more into this, but it's the reason why Tony Ressler didn't want to get into the luxury tax. It's not like Tony Ressler hasn't paid his players. He's super maxed out Trae Young. He's given John Collins $25 million a year. They gave Capella a nice extension to play 55 games. They're going to have to probably pay DeJounte Murray, if you're going to keep him around, like max kind of money. So, DeAndre Hunter got a megalodon contract for really what his production is. So they've paid out money. They just didn't want to get into the luxury tax aspect of it. But again, they'll get in the luxury tax just because of the attrition of the contracts that they have. But when it comes to Trae Young, it's just business. And you have those talks and you see what the marketplace will bear. I'm not mad that the Hawks floated out the idea of trading Trae Young. Would they do it? Were they going to do it? Probably not, more realistically. But when it comes to, your star players on a mediocre organization, you always have those kinds of exploratory talks. And you try to make your roster better. If that's adding 1 piece, 3 pieces, whatever to it. I want to talk about my friends over at BetOnline. Listen, betonline.net is your number one source for all of your sports wagering information. Look, We are neck deep in NFL playoffs. We just wrapped up wild card weekend, super wild card weekend, or whatever, it's called. We're in NBA season. Obviously, college basketball is going to be getting into conference play here, NHL, all kinds of things going on here. So when you head to betonline.net, take that mobile device. It's really simple and easy. Take the mobile device, put betonline.net into your browser, click on the link, get into the website, and then when you get there, check out all of the information that they have to make you a smarter sports wager. You want podcast news, you want stats, you want scores. All of the information that you need to make you a smarter better is available at betonline.net. And then once you do that, get in on the action. NFL playoffs, NBA season. Heck, I saw we're like a month and a half away from, or I guess a couple of months away. It's a month away, I think, from pitchers and catchers reporting. We're a couple of months away from the start of MLB season. All of that is going to it's going to be here before you know it. Heck, it'll be March before you know it, and you get in on the tournament. So head to betonline.net today. Get in on the action for all of your sports wagering information. betonline.net is where the action starts. So we heard news. Sam Amick on Friday of last week put out a story about dysfunction, whatever like that, within the Hawks organization. And the fact that Travis Schlenk is no longer not only the guy not in charge, but frankly, his voice is not being heard by the organization. And we found out that Tony Ressler's son, Nick Ressler, has a big influence on what is happening within the organization and things like that. We saw that Kyle Korver got promoted to assistant general manager. Landry Fields is now the full-time GM, things like that. And then, the trading Trae talk and all that kind of stuff. Look, this is the reality of the situation, okay? The Hawks are not good enough to get themselves into spending a bunch of money in the luxury tax and taking on crap tons of salary. And by the way, whether they're buyers or sellers at the trade deadline, things like that, you have to think long term. DeJounte Murray is going to be looking for a max type contract. So you have to decide whether or not you're going to sign him, which will certainly put you in the luxury tax and things like that. And then the attrition of the contracts are putting you in the luxury tax. But the Hawks right now are not a good enough organization to get themselves in the luxury tax and things like that. And there's some revisionist history about this Hawks organization. Look, if Kevin Huerter had stayed on the Atlanta Hawks, it would have put them in the luxury tax. That move was a luxury tax move. Now, whether Travis Schlenk was in agreement with that and this, that, and the other, we know that Travis Schlenk, did not want to give up all of the assets for DeJounte Murray. Okay. When your owner puts out an edict about the direction the franchise goes, whether it's right or wrong, okay, whether it's the right thing to do, whether it's going to be a complete disaster if we don't do this, okay? But when your owner puts out an edict and you don't, work within the parameters of that, then, your general manager is going to be on the outs, and Travis Schlenk, and now he's not a voice of the Hawks. And while I understand you don't want just yes men, the Hawks are not a good enough organization to go into the luxury tax to add a whole bunch of pieces just to be, when the results are on the court, a 38-win team at the midway point of the season. And if you can't keep your guys healthy, again, they've paid Trae Young, they paid John Collins, they paid DeAndre Hunter, they had paid Kevin Huerter before, they decided to trade him away. If you paid all those guys and then you're still a 38-win organization, then how good are you? How good is the drafting or free agent or trades or whatever that Travis has accumulated? And I'm not knocking on Travis Schlenk. I think Travis Schlenk did some really good things. But let's face it, you paid John Collins not max money, but star level money. Well, he's been pretty good, but he's not flourishing in this system. Trae Young is having, of late, Trae has been better, but he, for most of the year, was having his worst year as a pro. You can't absorb all those kinds of things when you're the Atlanta Hawks. Now, the DeJounte Murray thing, okay? We talked in depth about this. Did the Hawks give up too much? No. I mean, to get an all-star player, like how many teams added a better player in the offseason than the Atlanta Hawks for what they needed? The concept was there. Okay, Nate McMillan talked about this in the offseason. Well, and even before they had DeJounte, because I was at the Atlanta Hawks draft party. I was there the night that the Hawks drafted A.J. Griffin, and they were rumored to be making a deal for DeJounte Murray and all that kind of stuff. I was there that night and talking to different people behind the scenes, announcers, different stuff like that. I don't think the Hawks gave up too much because Murray is an all-star caliber player that fit kind of the profile. He can create his own shot. He's a defensive-minded guy. And it can get Trae to play off ball more. Now, the concept and everything like that wasn't ridiculous, but it hasn't worked out completely like that. And again, I'll say Nate McMillan will probably be gone after this year. Okay, that means Trae Young is going to be on his third coach in 6 years. Third coach in 6 years. Like, how many darts do we have to throw to get it right? So, while I understand Travis Schlenk did some really good things, and he certainly helped get the franchise back on a pathway, where it can be successful. But let's not act like he built the Warriors dynasty. Let's not act like he drafted Steph and Clay and Draymond and all that kind of stuff. He's drafted some nice pieces. He's drafted a star player that doesn't get along with his coach. They're not willing to go in the luxury tax. And yes, if they were a better organization, look, if they were 5 or 6 games, that's why taking advantage of that schedule from when I talked about the Sacramento Queens the night before Thanksgiving, and then going to the end of the calendar year, when they didn't take advantage of that. And now we're hearing rumors about maybe the Hawks will be sellers and stuff like that. Yeah, because they're not a good enough organization to go in the luxury tax. If they had been 6 or 7 games above, 8 games above 500 at the midway point, then it would start to make sense. But when you're fledgling around, you aren't healthy, you're not a very good team, your star player and your coach is not getting along, why do it? I don't blame Tony Ressler for this. Oh, Tony Ressler's meddling and stuff like that. And he's gotten his son involved and stuff like that. Okay, but if you don't operate within the parameters of what your owner wants, then you have to get voices that do what the owner wants to do. And they don't make a lot of sense to get into the luxury tax at this point. So again, is Nick Ressler the best guy to kind of be a voice? No, but you have Landry Fields and you have Kyle Korver. Let's see what those guys can do. But I don't think the Hawks, look, nobody wanted Donovan Mitchell, right? Oh, he's too small. He's a ball dominant guard. He doesn't play anything. We had I can go back through all of the comments on this YouTube page and show you why everybody didn't want Donovan Mitchell. So there's all this revisionist history. I don't think the Hawks gave up too much. I would have certainly loved to have Donovan Mitchell, but you got an all-star player. You added an all-star player. It hasn't worked itself out. and Nate's most likely going to be gone, barring a miracle run. But you have to be on board with what your owner edicts. You have to follow that edict. And right now, I don't blame Tony Ressler. Once you get into the luxury tax, it becomes punitive when you go year over year over year. And the Hawks right now are not a good enough organization. It's one thing if you're Golden State. It's one thing if you're Boston and you're making, Golden State's winning NBA titles and making the NBA finals. But this team has had one good run since the 60-win team. One good run since their franchise, in the franchise's history. They've had 2 runs of the Eastern Conference Finals. And they had the 60-win team, and then they had this team from a couple of years ago. And that's been it. Doesn't make sense to be punitive on running yourself into luxury tax and different things like that. All right, we thank you for making Hittin' Hard with Jon Chuckery your first listen every day. Make Locked On Sports Today your second listen every day. Biggest stories of the day, instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. They're available on Odyssey to download, YouTube, wherever you get your favorite podcasts from. So we had the University of Georgia's celebratory parade on Saturday through downtown Athens and all that good kind of stuff. And somebody who was, shall we say, disengaged from the festivities and the action and things going on was Stetson Bennett. And a lot of people were frustrated by Stetson Bennett's behavior, his attitude. He wasn't comfortable speaking. On the parade, he's looking at his phone the whole time. And, he's got all these things like he's distracted. He's got all these other things going on out there, right? And I'll say what people said. It wasn't a good look. Stetson Bennett's a different cat. Okay, look, at SEC Media Days, you see, let's see here. See if I can get this about like this. This is about 4 inches from where I sat from next to Stetson Bennett. Okay, met him at SEC Media Days, sat about 20 inches from him, and I talked to him, looked at him, sized them all up and things like that. Stetson's a different cat. Now, 10, 15 years from now, maybe they'll look back and say, I could have done things better and things like that. But the things that made Stetson so successful are what's made him a 2-time national champion. This kind of, attitude or whatever, is with it. It's what made him successful. And it's the narrative. Everybody has told him, you don't belong. You shouldn't start. You're not going to win. You can't perform at a high level. All of that negativity, and I'm not saying this year, but it's ingrained in his head. Look, we had Kirby Smart, who's the best coach in America. He's the best college football coach in America. He runs the best program in America. He's got the best team in America. He had these guys believing that they were going to be a 5 or 6 loss team this year. In fact, I'm going to read you a quote, and he wasn't dead serious about this, but he had a funny little line about, Kirby Smart, when Kirby was talking about David Pollock and things like that. He said, quote, "I didn't have one guy, not even our very own David Pollock, who said this group would make the playoff. They had something different in mind. Now, some of that's definitely tongue in cheek, okay? But he got these guys believing that they were not good and they weren't going to make the playoff and Stetson shouldn't be the quarterback. And all of this mindset that he drilled every day. You heard guys on the field talking about literally right after the national championship took place that nobody believed in us and this, that. Now, again, that's crazy talk, right? We know That's crazy talk. By the way, hand raised, I had Stetson Bennett on second team All SEC this year. When I voted in the media ballot for the All SEC team at SEC Media Days, I had Bryce Young first team and I had Stetson second team, because I do think that there is something to winning at the highest level in college football. Whether he had great stats or not or whatever like that, there is something to winning in college football. It's always that way with quarterbacks. So I had Stetson on second team. Now, I didn't have him in the Heisman race and things like that, but he's defied all the odds. And all of the things that have made him successful, look, when I met Stetson at SEC Media Days and I sat next to him and talked to him, he just comes across as a different cat. He's got that confidence. He's got that physically. You look at Stetson Bennett, and it looks like, he should be interning for a radio station. He's not intimidating. He's not going to intimidate anybody when he gets off the bus. I said this. When you looked at Will Levis, okay? Will Levis, when he was walking around SEC Media Days, he had a good-looking suit on. He looks the part. He's physically, when he's getting off the bus, as they say, he looks the part of an NFL quarterback, right? I said he was Bo Callahan. Remember from the movie Draft Day, right, with Kevin Costner and all that kind of stuff? Bo Callahan, he was the perfect fit, and, he was the model looks and everything like that. Will Levis looks like an NFL quarterback. He looks like, when you stand that guy side by side with Stetson Bennett, you look at Will Levis and say, that guy stands out. That guy should be an NFL quarterback. But Will Levis looks like Tarzan, plays like Jane. Stetson has been the MVP for all 4 of his playoff games, right? And he's a different cat that's wired in differently. And he took all that negativity and he turned it around into, arguably, I still say that, and we could talk about this another time. I still say that he's still the number 2 guy all time in Georgia lore, because I still think Herschel's number 1. There weren't 25 first-round NFL picks when Herschel played. It was Buck Bellew at quarterback going 1 for 12 for 7 yards, but we'll get in that. But he's the second most important player in the history of Georgia sports. In Georgia football, I should say Georgia football, only behind Herschel. But he's wired differently. And look, maybe he'll regret the way he acted and stuff like that. But what made Stetson so successful, and in those big moments, didn't faze him. He was the ultimate winner. All of those things were on display Saturday. And Kirby had those guys believing that they couldn't do it. That's how good of a coach he is. That's how, look, Nick Saban does the same thing. Rat poison and all this other folderol, right? These guys at this level, I don't want to say it's brainwashing, but it's a form of that. And these guys are wired differently. That's why they were 29-1 the last 2 years. That's why Stetson, coming off of a national championship, decided that for an encore, he wouldn't go 14-1. He went 15-0. 15-0. Didn't even start the year before. These guys are wired differently. Kirby's got them wired differently. So while I understand it may not have been a good look, and the fact of it was, maybe he'll have regrets later on in life, and, he wasn't as gracious and gregarious as he could have been. That's what Stetson Bennett is. When you meet him and you talk to him, that's the kind of cat that he is. All right, I want to thank you so much for making Hittin' Hard with Jon Chuckery your first listen every day. Reminder to make Locked On Sports Today your second listen. The biggest stories of the day, instant reactions, big game recaps, take of the day, It's available on Odyssey, YouTube, wherever you get your favorite podcast platforms, on your favorite podcast platforms. We ask you to head over to youtube.com, by the way. When you put Locked On Sports Atlanta into that search browser, hit that subscribe button. We're pushing toward 6,000 folks subscribe to our channel. Be a part of our growing community over there. And listen, check us out every day on Locked On Sports Atlanta. We are also available on Spotify, Odyssey, all of your favorite podcast platforms. Download us today for free on all of your favorites. Roku and Amazon Fire. Yes, we are available on those platforms. I don't know what those things are, but Roku and Amazon Fire is where you can also catch us. And then follow me on my personal Twitter page at JMCH316. This has been Hittin' Hard with Jon Chuckery on Locked On Sports Atlanta.